Yeah, there's been a thing about the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and really, I hadn't really had a need for any concern of my birth certificate. But yeah, as a matter of fact, um, I was actually born. Of course, I may be kind of like blind and naive and actually believed like everything I read and on my birth certificate and actually believed my entire um, thing about it. But I'm just finding out that maybe some like change in with cumulative rollover into like the new millennium beyond the year 2000 is seemingly something about the year 2023. In my mind, at 23 ingredients in 23-year celebration. It's the only celebration I know of like any American product such as like Dr. Pepper. I think it's like the only one I know of that actually celebrated the 23-year anniversary um, of its point of origin um, of Dr. Pepper. And, it happened to actually be 23 ingredients as well as the 23-year anniversary celebration that way. It's like 46. It's almost like the absolute value of like night vision almost. Um, and something about Sarbanes and Oxley. It seems to be ultimately getting, you've heard GMC talk about raising the bars, and Sarbanes and Oxley seems to be the thing about the bars and all that stuff about the same stuff. Given reference to something about the Sarbanes and the pronunciation and all that stuff about the Sarbanes and the bars and yeah, the same stuff, Anyway, so the Oxley thing, it's kind of like it had ultimately gotten to a color code, what that is to the Q thing and financial instrument and SOX compliance. It's kind of like it seems to be like whether or not if the Ox is really just the color code of what pi r squared is, or in that way of both issues involving maybe that my thought of what legal media is compared to deposition is, or ultimately getting I've been talking quite a bit about the separation between church and state, with a minimum requirement of some absolute Christianity in that way, and what Sarbanes and Oxley represent as absolute values that way of just Sarbanes and just the Sarb and the bars. And I mean, it's like really some absolute values of like beginning in algebra and what it seems to be with Dr. Pepper and the 23 ingredients of this being the year 2023 and like a pi r square thing about the year 2023 in my mind is automatically something of the 23-year celebration anniversary of Dr. Pepper and the 23 ingredients. It is 23 ingredients that way, and yeah, so it seems to be so the absolute values and what that is to even the Israeli flag in a 90-degree right angle that way, going through algebra and calculus on in to quantum and the big Q thing about it, and as well as like physics that way, and I was thinking about the color code of Oxley and what that is to SOX compliance as compared to the color code normally predominantly black and the Q thing being like a um, like the feedback and all that stuff about the FBI that way with like the LE and the EL and what that is with Texas and Mexico that way, and the thing about the Oxley thing and the 56 is 10 and the Y thing. But I mean, it's like I've studied quite a bit about that alphanumerics and linguistics and practical application of principle and predominantly more so with like the practical application of principle and linguistics that way on analytical, not necessarily any distinguishable difference as compared to what would be maybe my thought now, the word relation, how it's pronounced and spelled, between the architecture and platform. It seems so much to be involved with like the operator that way. And I've been speaking about the separation between church and state and the red color code between the United States codes annotated, the New Testament of like absolute Christianity, the King James Version Bible, and what that is to the Mormon, the Book of Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, as compared to what importing and exporting, in my mind, suggests to maritime law and anything representative of what amphibious would be associated to the absolute thing about Christianity of the resurrection and ascending that way, or even the second coming of Christ and the rapture and meeting in the sky thing. It seems to be like so it's sometimes about what the operator is, or the zero, and the computer programming of HTTP being 64 that way of zero and the operator, and the platform and the architecture that way of like international financial management and what the relation between that as compared to analytical or like Alpha-American linguistics with a minimum required. It seems to be like design is ultimately, like the big deal about, Grover Cleveland, U.S. dollar, or what that current resident is, um, in a way beyond what might be considered, terminology in the medical profession, or what that is in real estate, and more so with a fixture being identified, very rarely is it ever really talked about. A medical power of attorney being used as a fixture in real estate, or what that means is a promissory note, or a deed restriction, or mechanic's lien, or in a way that it's not a normal thought of what that suggests is what it really does is suggest really, I mean, on an analytical side of like proper English numerical composition, or what intellectual is in that way, or participation, whether the degree level of opportunity is only the significance of ultimately getting, in my mind, it's really getting to the issue, like the reason when I first started talking about the Bureau of Vital Statistics and my birth certificate, the thing about the birthplace in 1964 was on Belford Boulevard in Houston, Texas, the Memorial Southeast Hospital. It had relocated to the Southeast Memorial in the Sagemont area on Astoria. But anyway, on Belford, it's given the information that it has been now, including the Baptist thing about it. And, let's think about the memorial thing and what that is to, the Air Force and the airborne thing about the, my idea and thought about, my own experience about, something about, Flag Day on, SAT, Saturday, June 14, 1992, and, several days beyond that. But anyway, it's like reflecting, think about what the Air Force means to the airborne thing about it, and on, an alphanumerical level, distinguishing the difference whether or not if the alphanumeric 177 of a subliminal message is only going to be maybe, anything other than what national security suggests is maybe not telepathic communication in the form of like, terminology identifying like telekinetics and telekinesis that would only suggest maybe with the pin in the role is to a telekinetic thing, or, the thing about Abraham Lincoln, or the thing about the kernel and computer architecture and platform, programming in that way, what the kernel is, the country and the county, and it's like the principle of the P. When you see it, sometimes it's pronounced, and when you see it, it's not pronounced. It's, it's like when you see the R in country and county, it's like when you see it, it's pronounced, and when you don't see it, it's like it's not pronounced. It's like Lincoln. It's kind of like almost like something about the next of kin and what the word relation between architecture and platform is in that way. What relation is to, you've heard it before, the next of kin. And the thing about Lincoln and like night vision, it's kind of like something about to put it what next of kin, or what that means in animation or cartoons in that way, or artificial, what that is to a hood ornament. I mean, for real, Lincoln, Continental is the thing about the rectangle, and what that is to like on-site accuracy to the, my thing about the field scope and range of law, what that is to night vision, what seems to be significant now, it seems to be that seems to be the thing about Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln Continental that way, of the hood ornament and the rectangle and the 90-degree right angle that way, and what that is to the next of kin. See, Lincoln it's kind of like with it rearranged, it's kind of like the kernel with the R, or the kennel without the R, as compared to computer programming and the experience and the degree, whether the opportunity is only an imitation and doesn't have the experience, or maybe just wasn't quite there in that way. And it seems to be the telekinetic thing about the sometimes national security gives the impression, very rarely it's to be found about the telepathic communication, okay, as compared to the telekinetics. It's like the big difference in my mind, the difference between the subliminal message as compared to the mental telepathy that way, or telepathic power. And the telekinetics is kind of like, it suggests that it's normally evolving like a pen. It's not even identified like papermate or 56's10, or what that is to Roe v. Wade in alphanumerics that way, both alphanumeric and numeric, and combined that way, or Y2K itself being, a combination of both numerical and alphanumeric equating to 94. The big deal about the word annotated in legal terminology, as well as the Roe v. Wade thing, it's like, hey, you got it wrong. It's like it's suggesting that the abortion would only suggest whether or not if um, any adoption would be a consideration, and really what that is to the reality of it seemed to be affecting even a daily method of banking. I mean, for real, and what is beyond business and corporate law that way, beyond the executive class of the circuit, beyond the business and corporate law, going through a circuit, and what's all involved. Obviously, the military time about, it's kind of like, gotta be kidding me. Um, and it just seems to be, more and more whether or not if the colonel is going to represent what Abraham Lincoln is in studying in the dark, and what night vision is, that impedance and ambience, that way of like the pastel colors, and pastel being like all Harris about the Houston, Texas area, and electronic power, we international, and selective service, that way, or what Alphanumerics USA and attenuation is to Pearland, Texas, or a Purple Heart that way. It's kind of like thinking about that. And as far as like the telekinetic, it seemed to be like a real big deal of distinguishing from whether or not if a breach would be suggested as a lack of experience, or an impersonator that really didn't get the full deal about it. But the thing about it is that the telekinesis seems to be like the real big deal about the not the mental telepathy, but more so on the thought of a subliminal message. And my thing about the Psychic War, the book, in the book cover, the Psychic War, sometimes I think that, that would only suggest subliminal message in a way, and Psychic War being the thing about the, America's foremost psychic spy, and the cover-up of the CIA top secret Stargate program. And, the thing about, the cover-up, I mean, on the cover, it's like a guy underwater, okay? Yet on the cover, saying cover up, ultimately it seems to be like the big deal about the Air Force and the airborne of a baptism. And what it is to the Navy that way, or to the Air Force, or what amphibious is with J. Edgar Hoover that way. And my thought about the telekinetics would be representative of, I would say that it would be like a third-person issue of intellectual easement, how international law designates what having fair use is. And normally in entertainment law that identifies like an easement, like a compact disc or a DVD of motion picture. And not always, the issue of whether if it's a region 0 or region 1, or what region 0 is to an operator, as compared to like region 1 being like, the United States and Canada. Or what that is to a driver's license, for real, or, what that is to business and corporate law that way, as compared to what the Better Business Bureau is, as compared to, every type of bureau involved, whether or not that the country and the department is just going to be an issue of like giving the impression of what a department is, or a country representing a nation, or what that is to, my thought of international banking systems that way, of just that, and what comptrolling is to what, my thought of what a current resident, seems to be more and more about is, the currency over the categorization of money, not limited to it, maybe its own, point of origin in that way, maybe just, the thing about English and language that way of computer programming. And, my thought about it is it seems to be like a real big deal, distinguishing the difference between, the telekinetic thing about the pen, and it seems to be like the deal about the paper-made pen. And the 56-10 is 94 in the Roe v. Wade in that way, or what legal media as compared to deposition only suggests, or, proclamations and declarations, there seems to be some municipal issue within, the city's capacity, or, maybe going beyond what legal media is on a, local, national, and worldwide. And what that is to internet protocol and import and exporting that way of commerce seems to be, what the real deal is with communications that way. And, I've done quite a bit of looking at quite a bit about that, and I'm just really going on by memory. And the thing is that in my mind, it seems to be like when it gets to the amphibious part about J. Edgar Hoover, and it ultimately gets to, whether if the Wyatt Earp and the John Wayne is the distinguishable difference, what, the Lord's Supper as compared to the baptism is. And it ultimately gets to, if a birthplace of such as a memorial hospital, and what I'm seeing now is like the Memorial Baptist thing, it seems to be, like the big deal about, the history of the television screen, and what pastel to Technicolor, what it is, even in my mind, of like the Oracle Corporation between like database administration, middleware, and firmware. And what that is to Houston, Houston has been, back in the 80s seemed to be like always identified as a space city, um, more so out in the southwest area. And, like NASA is like the Clear Lake, Texas thing, and it's like it had always been identified as Houston. That way when NASA had been involved, even before, Houston even annexed Clear Lake, but it was always talked about, that way, NASA being that in Clear Lake, Texas. And ultimately, Houston annexed it that way. But I mean, it's almost like, biblical reference and symbolic in a way that, the Air Force Airborne thing about the symbolic representation on the backside, above the pyramid with the eye, and the new compass thing about that symbolic computation of that symbol in between the PTIS. And PTIS, likewise, in addition to being 64 that way. And my birth year seems to be, I've really been getting into it really because of an experience of a baptism, and it ultimately, resulted, days after, the thing about a Saturday, thing about a baptism for real, and June 14th, 1992. But, it just seemed to be, the significance of ever since then, it seemed like really focusing on two things that really I didn't even know how to explain the experience really at first, really, truthfully, other than, what it really was, but nothing, as far as like academic, but it's kind of like, hey, wow, But anyway, so, like years went on, and I was like really getting into it, and that way. But, the thing about the telekinetic, what I was really wanting to get at is that it seems to be like, if the role of the pen is only suggesting what paper made is, or, what that is to, even a three-dimensional surface, or, the flat plane surface of 180 degrees being like a telepathic answer, or what that is to the pi r squared, and using the pi r squared, the approximation of a radius with a 3.1416, and getting the diameter of it as a two-plane surface, and it's ultimately getting to, once again, the isometrics, and anything above the surface is normally identified in a cylindrical way above the surface in the terminology of volume. And it ultimately gets to, what that role of the pen is with telekinetics that way, in a pi r squared way. I mean, it's ultimately, it seems to be the real big deal about, Fred Flintstone, for real, about the wheels. And, it's a little seriously not funny to me about the cylindrical shapes, and what that is to, the practical application of pi r squared that way. Yeah, what that is to volume, an American Amplified Living Bible, and what a cartoon is to entertainment law that way. Or even, the thought of the car being, 22, or, RCA, or FDIC, or the V thing about it, and the tune being what the 64, what is that, the 30, 50, and 64, what is it, the tune thing, TOON is like 64, right? So, I mean, it's like really gets to, the PTIS and the ACTP, :// about the cartoon, and what programming is, to even, legal tender, and methods of banking, and analytically breaking that word tender into, ultimately to get into like the programming code itself. Programming legal code in alphanumerics of 200, being like the Lord Jesus Christ, a plenipotentiary, and, quite a bit about the, 200-year celebration of America. But anyway, it's kind of like it really gets in. And I was like looking at that on my birth certificate, because I just had a need to, something about my license that I'm really trying to decide really if I can get anything, beyond, a state driver's license, really. But there'd come a time that, it just didn't seem to be, quite the thing to do at the time, and I let my license expire. That's like, using my bicycle and, electric bikes and scooters and all that stuff, instead of, even having a need, because at the time it just didn't seem to be really worth the attempt. I mean, it was just something that never happened that way, but, almost immediately it's kind of like, I'm not going to go through that again. All right. So anyway, so that's what I did, and I let them expire. But anyway, now it seems to be the issue involving, the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and noticing that had changed, about the birthplace of like a Southeast Memorial on Belfort, and what that is, to the Southwestern Belle. I mean, it's ultimately getting to a lot of stuff about like Los Angeles, Los Angeles being 109, or the area code, 213, and what that is, seemingly it gets to like the alphanumerics, once again, of Robert E. Rubin, and, governor as president, 109 is 110. And that shows that Los Angeles being 109, and 110 is like the newest area code of Los Angeles, which is 323. And I mean, it's like the 109 is 110, the governor's president thing, and very much in my mind, you know, of the United States Secretary of Treasury, Robert E. Rubin, and what that is to a quarter. And all the African Americans, like the Houston area, seems to be so focused on, you know, the African Americans of using 64 and 36 that way, equating to 181, a considerable much about, you know. And it seems to be like the thing about the airborne, and what that is to the psychic warrior. And the book cover, I mean, it's so like, really, it seems to be like what the thought of maybe what might be termed in real estate is equity. Or, you know, sometimes in international financial management and investments, even New York Stock Exchange, in a way of what liquidable equity is as compared to with equity, you know, the distinguishable difference of, you know, and identifying whether if it's going to be a mainstay as a core, like a mandatory necessity, as a standard, not necessarily a projected estimate that would maybe only forecast, you know, something beyond what would be almost an immediate you know, standard, or not, you know, reflect any, you know, futures and options that would maybe be affected in that way based upon, you know, that type of analytical projection. Anyway, so it's like the thing about the difference between telekinetic and the mental telepathy, and the psychic warrior being a subliminal message, and what that is to the book cover. I mean, ultimately, it's getting to, you know, the cover up, and the book cover being like the baptism and representative of like some absolute Christianity. And, you know, I was just thinking about, you know, the thing about the memorial hospital, and what that is, you know, suggesting to even symbolic of like the baptism in Christianity, you know, representing, you know, the death, the resurrection, and ascending, you know, the Mount Olives after the third day, and you know, ascending into the heaven, you know, about the word transfiguration. Ultimately, you know, it's on the home theater now of like 192, and what American Amplified Living Bible is to the home theater, that way of the alphanumerics. You know, likewise, in addition, the word in Book of Thessalonians, almost the whole entire point of, like, you know, the entire thing about Christianity in the King James Version Bible, that way of the alphanumerics of 192, and that word transfiguration, and what the State of the Union address, likewise, or a telepathic pentagon, or a telepathic drummer, or bicentennial drummer, and a whole bunch of stuff about the alphanumerics of 192, and like 200 that way, and excuse me, and all the stuff about it, you know, it's kind of like a lot of stuff that I was thinking about, you know, what that is to even the Bureau of Vital Statistics, and it seems to be whether or not if the non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is only like something in my mind of what consensual participation, whether it be, you know, neglect based on lack of experience, or through default by ignorance, or, you know, just the accusation that it's a forfeiture, resulting in a, you know, a leave of absence, or, you know, a forfeiture based upon that fact, or, you know, a defector seeking amnesty. I mean, it's unreal, like, not funny to me, really. Or, you know, available closed caption for the hearing impaired, or, you know, what participation means, you know, or, you know, what's required of participation, even, you know, or, you know, use anything that would be thought of an exchange, or a placement of what has been normally earned, you know, unless, you know, and, you know, there's ways, and obviously there's more to it than, you know, considering what would be like a registered charity, or maybe annuity, and, you know, what life is, and you know, and sometimes it really matters where a person is really from, and, you know, generations of, you know, if the word is even family, you know, in the venue, or just, you know, anything more or less than, you know, president, executive, and legislative thing about, you know, whether or not a family is really ever really going to be the word, other than like maybe in entertainment. I mean, if that's only where it seems to be the significance, or, you know, if anyone can even prove that, you know, participating in family law would be maybe the only neglect of, like, maybe not even being on television, or, you know, participating beyond, you know, or taking anything about legal media or deposition, you know, that way, or, you know, and you know, predominantly, you know, like, as far as like my drums, I mean, you know, really, I would have done this like considerable amount of time ago, but the thing with this is there's been like really a whole lot that has been presented in a way that, you know, but anyway, like now finally, yeah, all right. So, like, you know, started making, you know, what I see as my standards as far as, you know, a drummer, even a singer, really. But there seems to be the issue of, like, you know, what really I've used as a standard for myself was, you know, predominantly the point of origin of, like, complexity, ultimately, you know, beyond, you know, what popularity would only seem to mean, you know, like in the teens, as compared to, what participation meant only as maybe what popularity only meant, maybe not necessarily actual participation of maybe what um, identifying it if that's the deal of entertainment in that way of popularity. But, like going beyond, the hype and into the practice makes perfect thing, goes, really, I mean, if popularity is the thing, I'm sure it goes its own way, and defines the meaning of, what an audience means to what type of performance is, it's like a point of origin of distribution that way, or, what, really, I mean, television seems to be, the thing about what popularity means more so in my mind of like teen at a PG-13 rating. Um, um, yeah, how true that is, the MTV thing is kind of like, something about that as well. But the thing with it is, I hadn't seen that in a while. I hadn't really looked for it. But in any case, yeah. So like I said, I'm using like YouTube, okay, from like my personal preference of like what I've used as a standard, as a drummer. Likewise, in singing, I really hadn't got much into like really, video recording, really much of like, singing really truthfully at all. But I do it all the time, okay. But anyway, like I'm drummers, like sometimes it's like really, with progressive rock, or normally what I practice is like really kind of get seriously, controlling this about been like real issues about, all that stuff. But anyway, yeah. So like anyway, so like I'm using YouTube for that, and likewise other edition. I probably wouldn't be saying anything had some other issues had not taken place, and had a little bit of, I don't even like calling it downtime. Whether it is or is not, I really don't like calling it that really at all. But anyway, kind of like, I kind of like, took the time, actually have to say what I have to say about whatever my thoughts are about it. And right now it seems to be the thing about the Air Force and the airborne thing, and the national security, the information seems to be like a real big deal about, ultimately getting to the telepathic heart and the international thing about the, all that stuff of alphanumerics, or what that is to the book Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover-up of the CIA's top secret Stargate program. And it ultimately seems to be whether or not if that's ultimately getting to a baptism, I mean, for real, and what that is to even a memorial hospital, I mean, you got to be kidding me. And in that way, so I mean, it's like now it's kind of like I'm looking at my birth certificate, it's like Memorial Baptist, and it seems to be like you got to be kidding me. And my thing about, the thing about the alphanumerics of telepathy, and how true it is or not about, what annotation is to the minus, 26 thing with like alphanumerics 177, or mental telepathy, subliminal message, or telepathic power that way, equating, 151 Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and a considerable amount more about Secret Service, and the list goes on and on that way, or in that way, telepathic card, or the case about it, yeah. So anyway, so like that was something I was wanting to mention real quick. It's already going like close to 30 minutes, like 28 minutes right now. I want to say that because it seems to be like, something in my mind is seeing the difference between national security talking about telepathic communication as compared to you've seen it on separate, normally within the same duration, whether it's on the same channel, they're in the same week, or they're in a week or weekend. But, my memory about that seems to be the deal of the pin rolling, or what that is, to the volume, that way of a cylindrical shape, beyond, what a 90-degree right angle would mean to that as a, pi squared factor, using approximation of a radius with 3.1416, ultimately getting to the flat plane of a circle in circumference, and anything above it, yay, the isometrics into the three-dimensional thing, identified as volume. Anyway, yeah, so like I'm going to take a quick break, and I kind of hope I kind of covered everything I wanted to think about, but sometimes I have so much to say, sometimes it's kind of like, getting it all and like getting it in, and it's because really, I'm really not preparing anything. It's just that, over the years, I'm just starting to talk, and whatever comes out is, I take a few, maybe a couple of minutes just to think about it and just start talking, and then I realize it's like, oh yeah, but anyway, yeah, so there it is. I'm going to take a quick break and decide if I'm going to really do anything else beyond this point, okay? There it is, yeah.